Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Finally got my recording device to work on my Mac to make this video for you guys. So what I want to be talking about today is X-Men Days of Future Past for you guys. Now, I've been in a big discussion ever since Friday morning-ish to Friday afternoon, right around there, on this page on Facebook called the Legion of Geeks. Great page. Go check it out. It's on Facebook if you're a big nerd about comic books, superheroes, anything nerd-like, geeky-wise anyways. Go ahead and go to that page to like it. We have great discussions all the time. And I'm in the middle of one right now. So it's about X-Men Days of Future Past. And I was going to do my spoiler review. This could be my spoiler review. I guess you could say it's going to be on YouTube and everything. I'm going to share it on the Legion of Geeks. And I'm kind of frustrated because, people still like this movie generally. But they don't like it for the wrong reasons. I loved it. It's a fantastic movie. I'm going to get into why I liked it and all that. But there's some issues that people are having with it, and I guess I could kind of clear it all up more by like talking more than typing. So first and foremost, I went to go see this movie Thursday night at 10 o'clock, first showing in the area that I live in, all the way to Phoenix, I believe. First showing in the area, it's at 10 o'clock. And we were waiting in line for 2 hours, loads of fun, went with some of my friends' family, had a great time, laughed our asses off, went to Carl's Jr., had a great time, one of the best nights I've ever had in a while. Went to go sit down and see X-Men. I'm super excited. We're all big X-Men fans. I'm a big Wolverine fan. I'm a big fan of the franchise besides X-Men 3 and X-Men Origins. Now, the movie starts and fantastic. I mean, once with that first shot to going through the broken buildings in New York and showing all the mutants that are getting lined up to walk and go wherever they have to go, and then it does the classic Bryan Singer start to a movie, which was awesome. It's the DNA, the mutants, how it's all connected together, and then it does the whole the Cerebro door thing with the X, and it goes slams shut and everything, and it shows the X, and I'm just like, yeah, that's awesome. We're going back to Bryan Singer days when he was directing the movies. And I was indulged in this movie all the way through. I had never read the comics before, or the graphic novel of X-Men Days of Future Past. I've always wanted to, but I wanted to wait and see the movie first. I'm more different than a lot of people, and a lot of people get upset at me for saying, should have read the comics first. It's so much better. This. They actually do it right. Whoever said that Kitty Pryde was the one that had to go back in time from the start? It's just a story. If anything, comics and graphic novels change more than movies, so why can't they send Wolverine back in time? And why are people complaining that Kitty Pryde has extra powers? Since when does she get those powers? Does it have to be explained? They never really explained it in the comic books anyways. So anyways, moving forward, great movie. Sitting down, and they're in the future, and it starts with a clip of Bishop, Blink, Iceman, Sunspot, Colossus, Kitty Pryde, and Warpath. And so they're in this area, and future Sentinels are running the Earth, and these three Sentinels, I believe it's three Sentinels, they show up, future Sentinels, they come up, and they are just huge compared to these X-Men. They are ginormous, and they look badass, of course. And they have this demonic look to them with their little yellow eyes, and it was really cool. Now, and Iceman was there as well. So when usually when you go see a comic book film, usually the heroes clean up things pretty well, or they have about an even battle, and they pretty much clean things up. But when you're watching this and you're sitting down, I'm a big X-Men fan. I care for all the characters, and I'm sitting down watching the movie, and these X-Men are just getting pummeled by these Sentinels, absolutely pummeled. And, Iceman comes in, he does this classic ice slide, which was great. I love seeing that. He comes in, he's trying to freeze one of the Sentinels, and the Sentinel can change to, heat, fire to, counteract the ice. And he breaks that, and Iceman is obviously made of ice at this point, and he completely just tears off his head. I mean, yeah, it's only an ice head, but still, I was in the theater, I was just like, oh my god, Iceman's one of my favorite superheroes, regardless, and I was just like, wow, usually you don't see that happen to heroes. Yeah, we know heroes are going to win and they're eventually going to succeed, but to see superheroes get beat that bad is crazy. And then it goes to Blink. Blink was awesome, absolutely awesome. She's throwing portals around, people are jumping in and out, beating up Sentinels and everything, and then she gets stabbed, and she gets killed, and then Bishop gets killed. Bishop was awesome. A lot of people are like, they didn't do Bishop right. Personally, I don't know the Bishop character too well, but from what I can tell, Bishop was awesome. I mean, yeah, he had 1 or 2 lines, but who cares? Do you know how many how many actors and characters are in movie and how many lines they really have? I mean, it's just like, come on. I mean, there's so many actors in the movie, they don't have to have every line. Like, there were some senators during X-Men Days of Future Past that didn't say a damn thing. So they're like, oh, they didn't do that senator right. So it's like, okay, I mean, yeah, they want to go back to source material, but who cares? It's a different take on the story, and Bryan Singer made it work. He made it work. I'll get into my absolutely bold prediction of the decade towards the end of this video, but they're fighting, whatnot, and then it goes back to Moscow, and they're like, we have to send you back into the future, or back into the past, and, you know, correct things, make sure this never happens. And they send Wolverine back with Kitty Pryde, and eventually Kitty Pryde before takes Bishop, and she has him. They go back to the future to keep fighting these Sentinels over and over to give them a warning of where they're going to be. And you feel bad for them because they keep having to do this over and over and over and over. So to get things right again, but they're never going to win because there are so many Sentinels and they're completely badass. So they send Wolverine back into the past with Kitty Pryde. He wakes up and he has his bone claws. Awesome. And then he does whatever he has to do. And he's back in the 70s. Things are a little bit different, which is awesome. And he has to find Xavier. And he goes and finds Xavier. Xavier the school's closed. Beast and Xavier are the only ones there. Magneto's out doing whatever Magneto's in the prison. Mystique is out wherever she's doing, and all the X-Men are just scattered around. And they show up, and he shows up at the mansion, and Professor X is basically just like tattered and torn apart. And James McAvoy, phenomenal job. And to see Beast and Wolverine fighting was awesome. I was laughing the whole time, and it was really cool at the same time when he threw him across the building and he crashed into the stairs and everything. That was really cool. And then Beast got stuck on the chandelier, and Professor X came down and just looked tattered and torn, old as hell, and with the beard and everything. And it was really well done. He did a phenomenal job, and I'm glad he put a lot into the character. And I can already tell by the beginning, even what he did in First Class, he was going to be great in X-Men Days of Future Past. So they have to go break. Wolverine's trying to get him to do whatever he has to do. And at this point, Professor X doesn't want to. And he goes back into his room, and he looks like he's getting ready to tie off and shoot some heroin. Me and my friend were sitting in the theater, and we see him tie off with the belt, and he's holding it in his mouth, and then he has the syringe, and I was like, wait, is that heroin? And I was like, oh no, they wouldn't throw that in a movie. And I was kind of felt bad. I was like, oh, because, you know, heroin's bad anyways. I don't want to get into all that, but it looks like he's getting ready to tie off to heroin, and then he comes back down, and they did one of the best references in the movie, because he comes back down, and he's talking to Logan, Wolverine, and he says, we came to you before, referring back to First Class, him and Magneto. We went back to you before, we were trying to recruit you. I want to know what you said. You said, fuck off. And that was absolutely hilarious, because when you go watch First Class, because I had an X-Men movie marathon before I went to go see X-Men Days of Future Past. I watched X1, X2, X3, X-Men Origins, First Class, then Wolverine, and then went to go see Days of Future Past right after. So I kind of got in the X-Men mood, and to hear that reference, because it was fresh in my mind, was awesome. So we got to break Magneto out of prison. We have to prevent Mystique from shooting Bolivar Trask, and he's like, I don't want to, whatever. And then they end up going to try and break Magneto out of the Pentagon, but they're like, wait, how are we going to do this? And Wolverine is like, oh, I know someone. So they show up at Peter Maximoff's house. A lot of people don't know who Peter Maximoff is. He's Quicksilver. I know who he is. He's Quicksilver, but he was never referred to as Quicksilver. So they show up, and a lot of people were worried about Quicksilver in this movie, and he ended up being the highlight of the film. He was phenomenal. Evan Peters was freaking great. And to see the welcome mat a little torn apart because of running, and then they show up at the front door, and the mom's like, what did he steal now? They go downstairs to find him, and they don't really see him, and he's kind of just zooming all over the place. He's playing Pong really fast, which is hilarious. And they tell him, "Oh, we need you to, go steal something." And he's like, something about stealing. And then they look over the TVs, and there's a bunch of TVs there, 70s TVs. And they're like, "We need you to break into the Pentagon." And he just gives this look of just like, he doesn't say anything, but he gives this look of just like, it was awesome. It was hilarious. So they go to the Pentagon. They're going to break out Magneto. And what was awesome is Quicksilver can run really fast, and then he has duct tape, and this cop shows up in there with him, and he ties him up in the corner with the duct tape, and then he puts on this police officer suit, and he kind of just walks past him. And I think that's kind of funny because Quicksilver is usually, he can just zoom past, but he kind of just walks by casually like he's a normal person. And then he breaks him out, which was awesome because he had his hands on the glass, and he was just vibrating the glass because when you can run really fast like the Flash, your body vibrates, and he was vibrating the glass, so the glass exploded and whatever. And then they go back up, they have Magneto, whatever, and then they're captured by, well, not captured, a bunch of policemen show up, and since Quicksilver moves really so fast, time is slower for people that don't run fast, like Wolverine, Professor X, and Magneto. So he's running around, he's changing things up. What I would do if I could run really fast, I would, switch up guns, take hats, whatever, throw food and stuff. Absolutely hilarious, stole the show, and that was pretty much the last we saw of Quicksilver. They get Magneto out of there, and that's the last we see of Quicksilver until a little scene later in the film when he's holding his little sister in front of the TV when the stadium is around the White House. So Quicksilver was great. Story, freaking phenomenal. James McAvoy, great. Michael Fassbender is a villain. Make him any villain. He could do so well. He could be Doctor Doom. He could be Magneto. He could be Electro. He could be Doc Ock. He could be Mysterio. He could be anybody, and he'd be great. Michael Fassbender is a great actor. Jennifer Lawrence was awesome. Jennifer Lawrence was much better as Mystique in this movie than she was in First Class, in my opinion, because when I saw Mystique, I didn't see, I knew it was Jennifer Lawrence, but I saw more of a Mystique than I did a Jennifer Lawrence. I saw more of a Rebecca Romijn Mystique from the original X-Men. So I saw that she was freaking awesome. This movie is not a Wolverine movie like we all thought it was going to be. Guarantee all of us could make a novel out of the things that could go wrong in this movie that we thought would be bad. And they ended up being great. Because this movie looked like Wolverine was the highlight of the film, and people were pissed off, all these comic book fans. They were like, "Oh, this is supposed to be Kitty Pryde, this, we gotta do it back." You have to realize, Kitty Pryde, no one gives a shit about, besides maybe you. Us comic book fans, the 1%, the minority. So they're gonna send Wolverine back. And people are like, "Oh my god, it's a Wolverine film, I'm tired of seeing Wolverine." If anything, this movie is not a Wolverine film, a Professor X film, a Mystique film, a Magneto film, an old Professor X, a new Professor X, an old Magneto. It's none of their movies. It is an X-Men movie. It is the X-Men. It's not just focused on Wolverine all the way through. It's not just focused on Mystique all the way through. This is an X-Men film. This movie gave each main character, pretty much the General, Magneto, Wolverine, Mystique, Professor X, Beast even, all got their screen time. And they all did a phenomenal job. Patrick Stewart did great as old Professor X. Ian McKellen did phenomenal as Magneto. Once again, he didn't say a lot, but he did fine. And he doesn't have to say a lot. Just great. All the way around. This is an X-Men film. We finally get an X-Men film all the way through. Each character is connected to each other. We finally get screen time for each one. We finally get to see Colossus be Colossus, and people are mad. With Blink, in the final fight scene with future Sentinels, towards the end of the movie, when hell's about to break loose. Storm was just killed. Bishop was just killed. Iceman's about to get killed again. You see Colossus get thrown. Colossus jumps through the portal. He's falling through the sky. What I'm thinking is Colossus is going to smash on the ground. It's going to create a shockwave. It's going to knock the future Sentinels over. But that doesn't happen. Something more badass happens. So what happens is Blink throws a portal in front of the door where Wolverine's being kept by it being sent into the past. He jumps through that portal. He's falling straight down in the sky. You're thinking he's about to create a shockwave, but Blink throws another portal, and he falls through that portal and comes out the portal in front of the door and crashes right into a Sentinel and tackles him. How badass is that? We finally get to see Colossus do something badass. People are mad he didn't have enough lines. Having lines doesn't make a great character. Look at Bucky Barnes, the Winter Soldier. In Captain America, the Winter Soldier. How many lines did he have? I don't even remember because it came out in April, but like what, 5, 10? Maybe not even that. You don't have to have lines to do great. Bishop had what, 2 lines? Still an awesome character. He absorbed the energy and he shot his gun, whatever. I don't know the Bishop character well enough. Storm was fine. She didn't do a lot. Yeah, she would have been nice to create like a hurricane or a few more tornadoes or something. But Halle Berry was pregnant. And then Iceman was awesome. To see that ice slide was classic. Was enough for me. Kitty Pryde was great. Sending people back into the past. Awesome. Walking through walls. Awesome. And it's just like, Warpath was even cool. Shit. I mean, we finally get an X-Men movie. A full X-Men movie. Where it's not focused on just Wolverine, Cyclops, and Jean Grey. It is focused on all the X-Men. Because this affects all the X-Men. And to see them get their ass beat by the Future Sentinels in the end of that film was heartbreaking. Because I actually cared. 1, because I grew up watching the characters. And 2, because, I mean, it was just brutal. Usually when you see a superhero film, you don't see the superheroes getting beat that bad. Superman Returns, the best part of that movie is sadly was seeing Superman get stabbed in the back with kryptonite. That's brutal because that's his weakness. Usually the X-Men are messing things up as a team. But they're not. They're getting their ass kicked. They're getting their ass beat. They're getting their ass handed to them. And these Sentinels are awesome. And because at first, they don't explain how the Future Sentinels can change powers and stuff and all this and create like spears with their arms. They don't explain that until after we see it. So you're like, how is that even possible? They just got their ass beat the first time at the beginning of the film. And then Professor X or Magneto was like, oh, Mystique's powers were transferred by Bolivar Trask to make the Sentinels, and it was an awesome storyline, and it fits so well because you saw these characters and they did have the scales of Mystique to be whatever power they wanted to be, these Sentinels. So that was awesome. It's a great ass film. This is the best film of the year so far. Godzilla was great. Captain America the Winter Soldier is awesome. And I'm not trying to compare the films, because there's no reason for comparison. Yeah, I make that mistake constantly over and over, but now the more I think about it, there are no reason to compare these films. Yeah, they're completely different, but when you have to look at the films, you look at these films, you're talking about Peter Dinklage, who still did awesome as Bolivar Trask. He didn't say a lot, but when Bolivar Trask was there, and Peter Dinklage was playing that character, it was menacing. It was because he has this like maniacal voice. Like he just has this overpowering voice for this short little guy, which is hilarious. And to see him walk around as a stubby little guy, no one really references that, but he's still a villain. Because I mean, yeah, I would have liked a little more screen time, but it doesn't take away from the fact that he was still a great villain because he legitimately thought he was changing the world. In the little scenes that he had, you could tell he thought he was changing the world. And that's what I saw. I didn't see some short little guy that got very little scenes that didn't have a motive. Like Electro. I mean, Electro's motive is different because he has a more comical type of motive. Bolivar Trask's motive was to wipe these mutants out because he thought he was going to change the world for the better. And it ended up not working, obviously. But I loved it. I cannot find a flaw in this film. The storyline. The story was great. In the snap of a finger, they erased X-Men 3 and X-Men Origins. My theory is, with a snap of the finger, by showing Jean Grey and Cyclops, every single X-Men movie besides the Wolverine and First Class are erased. X-Men 1, gone. X-Men 2, gone. X-Men 3, gone. X-Men Origins, gone. That's my theory. Here's how I see how the timeline works. The Wolverine, then First Class, then Days of Future Past, then X-Men Origins, then X1, X2, then X3. Now, I really don't want to think about it more and more because the more I think about it, I'm like, but how does this connect? How does that connect? I don't want to think about it. I'm thinking about Days of Future Past. And what Days of Future Past is the perfect prequel, sequel, reboot to a franchise. It was 3 films in one. And the Blackhawks are beating the Kings 2-1. Awesome. So, X-Men Days of Future Past serves as a prequel, a sequel, and a reboot to an amazing franchise. People are like, Fox has the wrong hands on this. It should be Marvel. Marvel should buy the rights back to X-Men. Personally, after seeing Bryan Singer do this, damn, what a great film. Awesome. Like I said, great storytelling. They told a story so well. Usually time travel stories are like, my head's here, but over here, but how did this equal this, and whatever. It's crisscrossing all over the place. Phenomenal acting by James McAvoy, Hugh Jackman, Michael Fassbender, Jennifer Lawrence, Patrick Stewart, Ian McKellen, Halle Berry even. I mean, shoot. Peter Dinklage. Everything was great. Evan Peters as Quicksilver was the best actor in that movie. I'm obviously kidding, but he was great. Highlight of the film. Almost stole the show. He was great. Then they had, even when there was little action sequences, I'll admit it, but when there was action sequences, it was brutal because the X-Men were getting their ass handed to them. And you usually don't see that. Usually you see a fairly equal battle. They'll usually trade blows, and the choreography is really cool. Captain America the Winter Soldier still had the best fighting sequences that I've ever seen choreographed-wise, because that was just awesome just to see like karate-esque MMA type stuff, and it was really, really cool. It's still my favorite to date. But the action sequences in Days of Future Past, although they don't trump the Winter Soldier, Days of Future Past, when there were action sequences, they were awesome. There was very little, I'll agree, but to see the pipes from the concrete wall running through Wolverine's body, what? I was looking over to my friend's uncle, and we were just kind of like, oh my god, because Wolverine is like one of our favorite superheroes. We were like, I would never expect to see this in a movie. It was brutal. You don't see that in a superhero comic book film. To see Iceman get his head ripped off twice, basically. Brutal. To see Blink get stabbed by 3 spears from 3 Sentinels. Brutal. To see Bishop get these heat blasts from their face by 3 Sentinels. Brutal. To see Halle Berry get stabbed in the back, thrown off a cliff. Brutal. I mean, to see Magneto making his last stand, pun totally intended, against the wall while he was trying to protect Wolverine and protect the good X-Men, although he's the bad X-Man, it's devastatingly sad. I mean, I wasn't like crying, it was like, oh my god, tear, but it wasn't an ending I was expected. Yeah, I figured the heroes are going to win, this, that, and the other. But who knows, maybe Xavier would have got torn to shreds. I would have liked to have seen that. Yeah, I don't want heroes to die or get torn to shreds, but it would have been really cool and even more devastating because Professor X is a classic character that everyone loves. So, when the action sequences were there, they were great. The comedy was hilarious. Absolutely hilarious. I love the reference to Quicksilver being Magneto's son because they're there and he says, so what's your power? And he's like, oh, I control metal. And Quicksilver's like, oh, my mom met someone. I think my mom met someone like that before. That was absolutely hilarious. Now, a lot of people have issues with the movie. And a lot of people are nitpicking the movie. I can't stand people who nitpick movies. You just have to not think as hard. Because if you think as hard and think like logically, you're just going to ruin the film for yourself. You'll still like it, but it won't be as good as you should be liking, like me or a few other people. Because I was talking to someone on this Legion of Geeks page, and he said, why didn't someone chase down Magneto? You mean to tell me, hang on, listen, you mean to tell me, after seeing what Magneto did to Wolverine, after putting metal into the Sentinels so he can control the Sentinels, and pulling up the entire Washington National Stadium, putting it around the White House, and then pulling the president's secret safe out from under the White House, into the White House, out of the White House, in front of him, and opened and tore off the door, you mean to tell me someone's going to chase after him, even after he breaks out of the Pentagon? Hell no. Hell no. And you can't think hard like that. You can't think, but why this? Where was this character? It didn't follow the comics. They're different. They're going to be different. They're going to take bits and pieces out, but it's not going to be the exact same. I mean, it's just obvious. It's common sense. And why is it that everyone who's trying to get a career in movies or has a career in movies happens to love this movie and gave it a 10 out of 10 or a 9.5 out of 10? I'm not saying your opinion's wrong, but you're just ruining the movie for yourself and taking the experience away that I had. When that movie ended and it showed Mystique as William Stryker with the yellow eyes, I stood up and freaking clapped. Everyone clapped in that theater. These X-Men fanboys, about 10 of us, clapped. Every single one of us in that theater clapped because we experienced a film that we weren't expecting. A lot of people were going in worried about this movie. I went in as one of my favorite movies. I was still a little bit worried, but I just happened to have hope. And Bryan Singer brought it to the table. If I could rename this movie, I'd call it X-Men Bryan Singer Returns. This movie was the shit, alright? This movie was freaking fantastic. Everything about it was perfect. There's not really any flaws to this movie. Are there things that could have been better? Yes, but everything was delivered on all cylinders. Acting, story, action, humor, everything. Romance isn't needed in comic book movies. Have you noticed when a superhero comic book film does not have a romance story, it is better? Dark Knight. Every single Batman movie has no love interest besides, I mean, we can't really count Batman and Robin because that movie is absolutely awful. But when you look at the Dark Knight trilogy, no specific love interests. Great. Captain America the Winter Soldier and Captain America the Winter Soldier. No specific love interest. He had a love interest in Captain America. It was okay. You look at Thor. The Thor movies are still great, but the love interest in that movie is awful, although Natalie Portman is very attractive. And then you look at Spider-Man 2, Amazing Spider-Man 2, my second favorite superheroes, but there were issues in the love story in those movies are the best, and they happen to be very well done by Mark Webb. No interest in love interest in X-Men Days of Future Past? Fantastic. There doesn't need to be romance to add another element to a movie. This movie, in my opinion, my honest-to-God opinion, and the more I think about it, the more I agree with myself. X-Men Days of Future Past is a 10 out of 10 film. This is the second time I've ever given a movie a 10 out of 10. Are there things that could have been better? Yes and no. I would have loved more action sequences, but with what they had, it was great. I would have loved to see Wolverine tear shit up, but when he did, it was still really cool. Plus, he didn't have adamantium, so he's not going to be as badass. This movie's a 10 out of 10. And I'm not changing my mind. At first, yesterday, on Thursday night when I walked out of the theater, I was like 10 out of 10. And when I thought about it, I'm like, nah, I can't give it a 10 out of 10 because that means it's perfect. But then again, it is perfect, so I changed it to a 9.4. Then I was like, but this movie, the more I think about it, it's just, there's no flaws. No flaws in the film. 10 out of 10. This movie is a 10 out of 10. The only other movie I've given a 10 out of 10 on, The Dark Knight. This movie is Dark Knight level. Hang on, I gotta think about what I just said. This movie is below Dark Knight level, but not by a lot. What would have made this movie on the same level as Dark Knight is a more villainous villain. I mean, Bolivar Trask was great, don't get me wrong, but they needed Heath Ledger Joker villain to give it the same level. This movie is just below Dark Knight level. I'm not changing my mind. This movie is a 10 out of 10. The cinematography, the visual effects, the story, the action, the acting, everything combined as one was great. This movie, just like The Dark Knight, is a different genre of film before a comic book film. And that's why I think X-Men Days of Future Past will get an Oscar nomination. I said it. The Dark Knight got trumped of an Oscar nomination, barely. And with the reviews that X-Men Days of Future Past is getting, I believe it has a 94% on Rotten Tomatoes. With the review that it's getting, the critical acclaim, the fan acclaim, this movie will be will have an Oscar nomination. It won't. I highly doubt it will win. It's a comic book movie, but it will get an Oscar nomination. Rightfully so. This is a great film. It is not this is in my top 5, top 20 comic book films. This should be in the top 30 films all time. I mean, yeah, I'm talking about some great films, but this movie should be in the top 30 of films of all time. Plain and simple. On IMDb, out of the top 250, The Dark Knight is 4. X-Men Days of Future Past, in my opinion, just below Dark Knight level. Top 30. Definitely. All time. It's a film. It is not just a comic book film. It is a different genre of film before a comic book film. This movie is a sci-fi film before anything. The Dark Knight was a crime drama before a Batman movie. Before a comic book movie. So overall, this movie's a 10 out of freaking 10. And it's just a great movie. I enjoyed every bit of it. I enjoyed all 2 hours and 10 minutes. Nothing felt slow. Nothing felt rushed. Everything was on point. The acting, everything. I cannot express it enough. That scene, it's already one of my favorite comic book scenes in comic book film. Michael Fassbender and James McAvoy are in the plane, and they're arguing about something. And James McAvoy saying something like, "You left like something about leaving us and going to the dark side," whatever. And then Michael Fassbender, in his commanding voice, was like, "You abandoned us." And it was just kind of like, damn, like it gave me the chills. And the movie delivered on all cylinders. I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And by seeing Jean Grey and Cyclops at the end was hilarious, because Wolverine walks down and he's seeing Kitty Pryde with Colossus how it should be. And he's seeing everything back to normal. The school's back to normal. And he walks downstairs and he sees this red hair with this red dress. And at first I was about to say, they're about to pull this whole, it's not really her, but it looks like her thing. So he walks up and she turns and it's actually Jean. And I'm like, oh my God, it's amazing. And he goes to touch her face, and then James Marsden, who plays Cyclops, comes up. Badass Oakley glasses, by the way, with a red lens. Ooh, badass. I want a pair. So he goes up to touch her face, and he's like, Cyclops comes up and he's like, "Whoa, what are you doing, man? Like, back off." And that was awesome, because it got a little love triangle thing, although Cyclops really deserves to get Jean, and Cyclops is the leader of the X-Men. It's just great film. Plus the end credit scene. Please, just take my money, Bryan Singer. I will drop $500 to see X-Men Age of Apocalypse before anybody. I mean, that end credit scene, because we're sitting in the theater, we're waiting, there's a bunch of people still waiting, and we're waiting, and it goes black for a second. I'm like, oh my God, they totally robbed us out of an end credit scene. And all of a sudden you just see it like slowly light up to this desert scene, and I'm just like, oh shit, what's it gonna... I mean, I was figuring Apocalypse, because the new X-Men Age of Apocalypse was announced. I knew it was going to be Apocalypse, and that's what I was hoping, but it could have been different. But it's this desert, and you come up behind this person with his hands up, and you see his slaves in front of him. And it sounds like Age of Apocalypse, okay? But they're saying something else. I don't know the words exactly, but it sounded like Age of Apocalypse. And someone behind me was like, "It's Magneto." And I wanted to throw my drink at him. But it comes down, and he's skinny arms. I was expecting Apocalypse to be a little bit bigger. But it comes up behind him, it pans over, and I thought they were about to pull a Thanos thing from the end of Avengers, where he kind of just turns his head and smiles. But it looks like a little kid. And then in the background, you see the 4 horsemen. And I'm just like, oh my dear, this is intense already. And then the more I thought about it, this is not what Apocalypse is going to look like in X-Men Age of Apocalypse. He's going to age. In X-Men Age of Apocalypse, which I really want to save this for another video. I really want to talk about that later. A 15-minute video. Age of Apocalypse is going to be the shit. I mean, when you think about it, 2016 is set with movies. You've got, Batman vs. Superman, Captain America 3, super excited for that. Then you've got Amazing Spider-Man 3, which should be better. I think it'll be improved. X-Men Age of Apocalypse, no idea how excited I am after seeing Days of Future Past. Then you've got a Star Wars spin-off movie Already excited for, big Star Wars fan. And then you've got Thor 3. Like, that year is stacked. Look, it is a good time to be a comic fan. I don't even think the comic book genre has hit its prime yet. We're about to hit it. 2016 will decide if if Batman v Superman succeeds and it is really good, then the comic book genre will have hit its prime. Because Marvel's doing great. Marvel's doing a fantastic job. Fox is doing fine. Sony's doing fine. But if Batman v Superman is, well, I mean, comic book genre will definitely hit its prime. So, I'm going to wrap this up. I've been talking 35 minutes now. So, I love the movie. 10 out of 10. I think it will be nominated for Best Picture at this next year's Oscars. I'm really excited. I love this movie. Go ahead and go like the Legion of Geeks on Facebook. We always have great discussions, great debates. I have a great time over there. Everyone is awesome. You know, some opinions are here and there. My opinion's not better than others. Your opinion's not better than mine. Just great debates, great time. If you're a geek like me, when you look in the background, you've got my Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, and Harry Potter right there, and a couple of my graphic novels and comic books here. So, well, hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you stayed around, give yourself a round of applause. Finally figured out how to talk with my face and camera. My computer technology could be a little bit better, but hope you guys had a great time. Tell me what you think down in the comments below this video. Was it great? Was it bad? What would you have liked to improve on X-Men Days of Future Past? What did you take away? And are you excited for X-Men Age of Apocalypse? I sure am. 5 thumbs up. Super pumped. Can't wait. Hope you guys had a great time once more. Hit that like button. Hit that subscribe button. Comment. If you didn't like the video, go ahead and hit that dislike button. That's your opinion, not mine. Anyways, have a great day.